Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. What a weekend. What a weekend, truly.
You
I
had
don't
a you had a weekend of activities.
I mean, activities, it's just basically keep your kids alive. That's what it is. Keep your
You're in
kids
that
alive.
yeah.
Keep your kids alive. Make sure that everyone has snacks and maybe we'll stay on a normal sleep schedule.
And maybe we'll have a little bit of fun.
That's, like,
Uh,
so low. That's so low on the totem pole. So low. I mean, we did have a little bit of fun yesterday, but if I can just keep everyone this is my control issue. If I can just keep everybody, on an even keel, my son not, face planting my daughter. Somehow she got a bruise on her nose, you know? I didn't even know that
yeah.
was possible.
Yeah, you're in a different phase of parenting than I am.
Yeah, and it shows. Look at my eyes.
I will say that when you move into my age bracket, which is 10 and 7, what it is you become a full-time referee. So the meltdowns happen in a different direction where there's my son lost the remote control on the first day of summer break, okay, for one of the TVs. So what that has meant now, which is still on it is lost in the abyss somewhere in our house. We have all looked for it,
What's the prayer that you're
cannot
supposed to
find it.
do?
St. Anthony's prayer?
Yeah. Did you do
Well,
it?
haven't tried that one. Maybe I'll try that, but I will tell you, we all searched where it was supposedly lost. What I think he has done is he removed the remote control from that room altogether and put it somewhere else. So where we are looking is probably not even where it is. But regardless, what this has culminated into is arguments over who's watching what dumb video on YouTube.
No.
Yes, because Beckett watches fingerboarding videos, which I understand a 10-year-old girl is that's not what she wants to watch. So this is the bane of my existence now,
No
it is
one actually wants to
refereeing.
watch fingerboarding except your 10-year-old boy. I mean, the
7-year-old, yes.
seven-year-old boy.
I mean, yeah, and poop and fart songs. That's his repertoire right now, okay? That's what you're in for.
No.
Yeah.
No. Well,
Yes.
my rabbit hole led to me you'll like this. So after I figured out, okay, what are we doing on the podcast today? Got a couple feelers out there. Then I went down the rabbit hole of, okay, now I need a functional medicine doctor. I'm like researching peptides. I am like so
Yes.
far into the abyss.
I'm loving this.
Yeah, at 10 p.m. I'm like,
I mean, not that. I was in bed at 8:30 yesterday,
I
fast
know.
asleep.
God. I mean, those are the days that I miss when I was pregnant and I was going to bed at like 7 p.m. It was just like off limits. I'm in bed.
Yeah,
I got to
I
get
had to go
back
to bed
on
early.
that.
My win for the week, one was watching my daughter play softball, and she crushed a double, and they won handedly, and then yesterday was
They won by a
packing.
lot.
They won by a lot. Um, but yesterday was packing, and I shared my video. I got a lot of responses on Instagram, like, people being anxious about my packing video. Like, it was
I don't think I saw that. I don't even think I saw that
my entire living room was just covered.
in piles. We talked about this.
Piles, just piles. I will say one suitcase is fully packed now. There's just some stuff, like, that I can't pack until we leave, you know?
Day of, night of.
So, I feel good about that now because I was kinda, like, waiting because we just haven't had time to pack.
Yeah.
All
I
done.
mean,
And then I coulda went to bed at 7 o'clock last night, for sure.
yeah, I know. We had a new family move into the neighborhood, so the kids were out. The kids were out. There was a lot happening. Scooters and quads and all sorts of shit going on last night.
Well, that's the thing is, like, I think my children are inheriting our priority around sleep because neither one of them complained when it was bedtime and it was still light out. I mean, they were asleep by 8:15.
I woke up this morning my son was in my bed with no pants on and just vertical. So,
We
like,
know
who
you don't
knows
like that.
what was happening. And then I hear the baby wake up. So I'm like, okay, I got to get up and get the baby, which is fine. And I figured my husband went on a walk because usually he'll like go exercise, walk, bike, whatever in the morning. So all of a sudden, I'm like, his watch was there. I couldn't find him. And my son was like, "Where's daddy?" And I'm like, "I really don't know." I mean, went to the basement, looked around, realized that the garage door was locked, so there was no way he went out for his walk. Finally, I hear someone peeing in the upstairs bathroom, and I'm like, "Okay, so something went awry last night." He was in my son's
Oh,
bed,
you oh, I've done that.
just solo. I'm like, "We love that for you."
Oh, when my kids used to crawl in bed, there came a point where it was cool until it wasn't. I would sleep in the other room.
Yeah, yeah,
Musical beds.
musical beds. So, let's get into it. Let's talk about what we're talking about.
Talking about creating work culture today. Honestly, one of our favorite topics.
One of our favorite topics. I really, wanted to kind of talk a little bit with some like old colleagues, some old direct reports last night. Really got the juices flowing about my deficits. Some people were really brutally honest, okay? And I wanted them to be, what were
Yeah.
my strengths? What were my deficits as somebody in leadership? So I think where we'll start is what does culture mean to you in the workplace?
Culture to me is how your people feel when they show up to work.
Mhm, mhm,
How they feel on a Sunday night knowing that they have to go into work. Um, we work in a people business.
uh-huh,
Our field is behavioral health, but I do think that the stuff we're talking about is applicable and relevant to all people businesses, which if you think about it, is most businesses. When you're employing people, you're dealing with people.
yeah,
Um, and I think that culture is really the safety that your staff feels to be able to move forward because there's a lot of difficult conversations that need to happen. There's a lot of feedback that needs to be given both ways, not just to the staff, but to us in leadership as well.
uh-huh,
And in starting this newest business that we have, we talked a lot about this culture stuff before starting. I think we can get into it here, but we both worked for really toxic cultures, and I think a lot of the lessons I've learned is from those toxic cultures.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
what
think
that's
that
what it would mean for me.
I think workplace culture ultimately means how are you cultivating the mission and vision amongst your staff to then trickle down to your clientele? Because that's
Yeah.
what we work in, right? So for our clients, if the mission and vision aren't being adhered by the staff and the people that we hire, whether that be full-time, part-time contractors, trainers, whatever it is, that's felt amongst our clients, right? And so how I always leaned into the culture aspect of the company was again, our clients are taking a risk on us. We're not taking a risk on them. And how are we adhering to the mission and vision that cultivates the environment that they can get well in? And unfortunately, that doesn't encompass feelings and all the things that come up in our staff that they tend to sometimes put out first before carrying the mission and vision. I am totally willing to sit down and grapple and hear you out and accommodate where necessary, but the mission and vision have to come first in order to level set the culture. That's what I found to be most effective.
Yes, and if you don't address those emotions and feelings that are coming up in the staff, you'll never get the buy-in for the mission and vision,
Totally.
right? So
Totally.
it's a balance. And as I have developed other leaders underneath myself, I think one of the harder lessons for those people, those, like, middle management people, you know, to kind of understand is, well, why aren't you addressing this thing now? Or why are you addressing it this way instead of this way? Like, I think sometimes for managers, it's very black and white. Like, they didn't handle this correctly, so we need to address it, or they made a mistake and you know, they either need to be written up or like I think when it comes to dealing with people, we're living in a gray area and you really have to look at so many factors to take into place, and culture is a big one of those factors when you're
Mhm.
going to address staff performance issues,
Yeah,
staff attitude issues, um, and also going back to mission and vision, how often are you reviewing that with your staff? Because
we
I
reviewed it a
know
lot. We
because
reviewed
I
it a lot.
know in our orientation, we really go over mission and vision during
Yeah,
orientation, like, you know, at Inspire Recovery, we have it's a smallish staff, right? We're
mhm,
around 20 employees right now. We're at the point where we can be a little bit more selective with who we're bringing on, and they have
yeah.
to fit the culture, they have to understand the mission and vision, they have to be on board with that, because I will tell you the couple of people who have left recently are people that can't get on board with that mission and vision, and frankly, I don't one bad apple ruins the whole bunch.
So I think that, like, what were the barriers in creating that culture, especially in, my most recent endeavor and project? I mean, I think the barriers for me, the I don't believe that the culture goes downhill without a contributing factor of leadership, right? So whenever the
1000%.
culture was off or kind of taking a detour, it really I'll take full accountability. It usually had to do with either I was resting on my laurels, so to speak, and I was ambivalent about making a necessary change,
Or
whether that be
addressing something.
yeah, right. So like someone not being in the right seat, somebody conflict, right? Amongst it usually didn't have to do with conflict with me, but conflict with mid-level management or otherwise. Because again, there's this conflicting energy that I would have that I wouldn't want things to go off the tracks and have to train up a new staff or move somebody around or sacrifice my time when really my time would have been better utilized, more efficient and more effective if I had just ripped the band-aid off. Right. So for me, the
Yes.
culture really becomes impacted when I'm turning a blind eye.
We've had so many conversations about this,
Yeah.
especially in the last couple of years, and one of the biggest lies leaders and people in management tell themselves, if you are a business owner, if you are a leader and your team is struggling and you're saying it's their fault, you're never gonna get the productivity you want, you're never gonna get the performance you want, you're telling yourself a lie. This goes back to you need to point the finger back at yourself and say
Mhm.
and ask yourself, "What am I doing wrong or what can
Yeah.
I be doing differently?"
Yeah,
Because it
absolutely.
all starts with leadership. I mean, one of my biggest issues this is for sure in our field in behavioral health, but if you look at just corporations in general, you can see examples of this throughout the years. One of the biggest issues with culture is leaders who want to do as I say, not as I do, right? You
Mhm.
wanna give instruction, you wanna give whatever that feedback is, you want your staff to perform a certain way, but there's no accountability on the top level, and leaders are not held accountable for their actions. And I think is that's for me one of those points where staff get really resentful, they start talking behind your back, they don't feel safe, they're not gonna bring up issues to you, and that stuff trickles down. That accountability has to start with leadership.
Yeah, I think that there's 2 sides to this, right? I think the accountability for leadership is imperative, and, when I really look at, like, my journey in my career, I don't know any different, right? Like, the reason why I work in behavioral health is because I gain purpose from working in behavioral health, right? So for me, the two are so connected that I couldn't imagine sitting in a leadership role not getting dirty, right? Essentially. Like, I like being led by my team of where the need is. And then I also like leading my team to where they need to skin their own knees too, right? Because I'm a big believer that the reason that I have been able to progress is because been given a lot of opportunity to skin my knees and figure it out, right? And so, and leading on mentors and leaning on other men and women in different, leadership positions, behavioral health organizations, etc. The way that I was able to get there was really creating a level of vulnerability where I would ask when I didn't know, or I would share those face down moments. A lot of conversations you and I had, a lot of conversations I would have with my mentor and other men and women. So I do think that there is this level of leadership needs to show rather than just do. But there is this, I where I would get stuck personally is that when I would get frustrated, I would just jump in and do rather than let them kind of waffle and figure it out. And so that was my double edge, not necessarily, kind of sitting and not supporting or not helping. I think it's just as detrimental. What sometimes I would do is that I had all this knowledge already, and so I would problem solve for my team rather than allowing them to problem solve and me just be patient, right?
I just saw a video on this recently, and this woman was talking about this exact issue where when you do that, you're actually taking away the opportunity for your staff to gain confidence in figuring out a solution.
Yeah,
And it's twofold. One, it's our ego and pride saying, I know how to do it better, right?
100%.
So here's your solution.
Yeah.
And that also then dulls our staff's creativity because we're saying they get used to us. Well, I don't need to figure this out because Molly's going to come in and tell me what to do anyway. So I'm just going to sit back and wait until she figures this out. So then we're not even allowing them the creative opportunities to step up to the plate and come up with their own solutions. Because what I have learned over the years is we get really in our own echo chamber of our mind of this is the best way to do it. When in reality, if I'm not the person performing this task, I might not know the best way for that person to perform this task, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I've had to learn that the hard way through, some difficult conversations around, hey, why isn't this done like that? Why isn't that done like this? And in a micromanaging way, to be honest. And I have staff that know that they can come back at me and say, "Can you step back and let me handle this? Let me do this my way." And I need that honest feedback in real time, not just when I ask it, but in those moments of, you know what, I got this because you can't say you want that from your staff, but then take away the opportunities for them to show you that they can do it.
Well,
And
it
just
also just breeds a level of resentment too, because what
it,
happens
for
is
sure.
I will problem solve for them, right? Whatever it is. And then with the next situation, I won't because I'm like, okay, I got to dial it back. And now they're resentful because when I push back and I'm like, hey, I think you need to figure this out. I'm here to support.
It's a mixed
They look at
message.
me, they look at me sideways. They're like, "Well, what do you mean? Now you're not giving me a life raft?" So I really had to grapple with that in the early stages of the organizations that I was working in to start to realize that that was gonna be ineffective. And that meant I had to be patient with seeing how the outcome would transpire, right? And so there were things that I feel like I did really, really wrong, and there were things that I felt like were really, really useful, you know? And one of those was really allowing the team to rumble with themselves and amongst themselves so that way they could come up with a solution together rather than me always looking at the big picture. Because the reality is the mid-level managers are there to be in the minutia. They really are, right?
Yeah.
You as the executive director or CEO or COO or chief clinical officer or whatever it is in behavioral health, you're really there to be the zoom out, and to be kind of overarching looking at the whole organization. Your mid-level managers are there to be in the day to day, you know?
So let
So
them.
So let them, yeah.
I will say for my perspective, I'm the owner founder, and so I started with 2 employees, then we added more, then there was a need, right, to create that middle management, and I think for a lot of small therapy practices, I'm thinking of even small family businesses, probably the most toxic work environments that I've ever heard of, to be honest with you. Um,
Yes.
you know, I will say that creating those structures, which was sometimes pushed back on. We don't need this, everything's working fine. I am a visionary in terms of I can see 4 steps ahead before we're there and, like, what steps I have to take to get to that. Like, that's definitely one of my strengths.
Uh-huh.
I've had to learn that not everybody on my team thinks like that. So it can be very overwhelming when I can share a vision, right? But sometimes that scares my staff because they're like, "Whoa, that's way more than what we're doing now.
Yeah.
We can barely handle what we're doing now. I can't go
Right.
there." I've had to dial some of that back, or you, hold on, this isn't next month, this isn't even next year. But if this is where we want to get to, there are some things we have to put into place now. That structure and building that's I'm really good at that. That's probably why I like being an entrepreneur, right? I can put those systems in place. I can really put the right people in place. I also I think building culture too is around identifying the strengths that people have that they might not even understand they have yet and
Yeah.
building that up in them. I
Yeah.
know I've really had to wrestle with some staff around that recently, which
Mhm.
came to a head where I really was pushing this person. You are in a leadership position. I need you to be in a leadership position. And that word was so scary to her. And it's like, well, I don't want to push you somewhere that you can't go, but I also am not going to push you if I don't think this is where you can go, right? Like goes back to that conversation about pulling people up. If you're a willing participant, I'm going to pull you up. I want people underneath me to be where I'm at. That's the
You want
whole
them to take
goal.
your job, essentially,
Yeah,
right
I
people, right
want
seat.
you yeah, I want the
Yeah.
right people in the right jobs.
Uh-huh.
Um but I think going back to anyone who's listening, who's like, "Okay, well, it's me, and then I have some staff," because a small business, usually the
Yeah.
owner, you're running everything, right?
Yeah. Right.
You can still start delegating and having some leadership moments and trying to back off those micromanaging things by identifying, well, who's is there somebody who's a lead amongst all these staff? And like, how can I create some of this structure so it doesn't all just fall on me? Because the other thing, and I think this is why private practice is especially lonely for therapists as they start like hiring employees and stuff. You feel like, well, it all ends and starts with me. It's just me. And who do I share decision making with? From
That's
the
a
very
dangerous mindset, really
yeah.
dangerous
Well,
mindset.
I see a lot of people run their businesses like that, especially therapy practices. Well, what I say goes. Well, let me tell you one of the most important lessons that I have learned. You really need to check in with your staff on some level before you implement a policy that is going to change their workflow, their lives, the things that they're doing.
Mhm.
Because sometimes we have these really great ideas, like, oh, this will solve that problem. We implement it and it completely backfires. 1, we didn't ask for any input and we're not even the ones doing it. 2,
Mhm.
and I see this happen all the time at organizations, it creates such a shitstorm. Just that one thing, like, "Oh, this is how we're gonna do it now." Staff, like, revolts around that. They're like, "Well, who are you to tell me? I've been doing it this way. No one told me it was the wrong way to do it." I, from the very beginning, have had really honest conversations from the first employee that I hired. I need you just as much as you probably need me right now. Like, I need your feedback. I want your feedback. If something's not working, please tell me because I can't see it all.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's where comes in for culture, what do your employee surveys look like, I think that's as a as the executive director, CEO, founder, co-founder, you look at these surveys and you kind of there's one side of the coin that's like, okay, you're dreading them a little bit because there's a lot of open door dialogue, at least there was for me. There's a lot of open door dialogue and you still feel like you find out surprises on the employee surveys, right? Like out of left field stuff like that you wouldn't have even really been able
Not
to
even on
dream
your
of.
radar. Yeah.
Not even on your radar, right? But then the other good portion of the survey, right? Say 70, 80% of the surveys would be, you know, really lifting up the changes that had organically taken place that year, right? What is going well? How do they feel supported as employees, as colleagues, as managers, as frontline staff, going through all the different tiers. And really, what that allows for is for you and the leadership team to kind of sit back and say, okay, these are the things that we've done really well. These are the things that maybe people are struggling with. These are the things that people will struggle with no matter what, right? There is this like subset of issues that, like, as a small business, let me just
Yeah.
name some. Health insurance, always going to be freaking expensive. That just is the way it is, right? Some of the, the benefits that we can give versus a multi-billion dollar company can give, right? So
And
some
it's
of
getting
those
worse.
things,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
those things are getting worse, right? So really what the idea of those surveys was how can we improve what's within our control and within our power, right? Because the things that people come back with that we can't change, that just is something that both you and I
Yeah.
have to accept, right? And people may leave because of that, right? There's
And
some people that are driven to work for a small business because of the perks of feeling family owned and
yep.
operated, feeling closer to your co-founder, owner, executive director, the level of access you have to that individual. But if you want the more expansive organization that allows for so many other,
Benefits,
I
really. I
guess,
mean,
perks and
benefits.
benefits,
Yeah.
that's something else.
And I was just talking to you about this on Friday. The ability to operate as a small business is getting harder and harder by the year. And I think even those conversations in our staff meetings, in my one-on-ones with my staff, I'm very upfront and honest about that because the reality is I don't have control over that. I have 0 control, and I think sometimes as an employee, they're not clued in. They just think, "Oh, they chose, like, the really crappy plan." It's like, "No,
They
no,
don't
no. This is
understand.
this is what's offered. I
This
I
is
I
what's
don't have a
offered.
choice."
Yeah,
We got
right,
booted off one insurance
right,
company last year because they're
right,
no longer serving
right.
small businesses.
Exactly.
There's only 2 options left, and
Yeah,
it's both, like, the worst or the worser. Like, there's no good
right,
choice right now.
right, right.
Um,
Yeah, and a lot of people
it's
don't
it's tough.
understand that. Yeah, they don't
And
understand that.
I will say to your point, there are a lot of things that staff just aren't always going to understand. For myself in my position, I take on 100% of the risk and liability for this business and the staff.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah, yeah,
At the end of the day, if
yeah,
something goes wrong, if some big bill becomes owed, if we get sued, it's me. There's no board of directors, there's no
right.
other people, it's me.
Yeah,
So that's worth stating. There's something there, right? But also some of the financial things I can talk about on a high level. I can talk about some of the decisions we're making or things that may affect them that are just hard decisions that I've had to grapple with, get some consultation around and rip the band-aid off. But some of it they just might not understand. We have to accept that. I've had to have some real difficult conversations, even in the nonprofit world. When I worked in nonprofits, we've had to lay people off when the state stops covering grants, when there's federal cuts, when there's state cuts. I mean, those
yeah,
things trickle down and
yeah.
affect us, and it's hard as a leader, I think, when you don't have an answer or a good answer, right? And however,
Well,
I have
everybody wants an answer. Sometimes they don't want your answer that you give, right? So they
yeah.
ask and ask and ask, and then I give them what I have available, right? Which is the truth. And that's not good enough, right? So there is this level of how much do you share? I at times would do this roundtable discussion with my mid-level managers to say, "Hey, you can ask me any questions about the organization as long as it doesn't have to do with someone who's been terminated and how much somebody makes. And whatever questions you ask me, I will be as transparent as I possibly can based on the information I have." Right? And so that also led to some really organic discussions. Do I think that you should do that with all your staff? No, probably not. I mean, I think that you would probably likely get into the weeds. At the time when I was running this particular organization, I mean, I had 40 plus staff, right? So maybe even more, maybe 50. But uh what I had leaned into was, hey, this was some feedback that I heard the CEO speak at a conference and shared that it was a really effective way to gain rapport with your staff. He actually did it with all of his staff, which was thousands and thousands of people, and I'm not exactly sure how he was able to manage that. But for me, with, 6 or 7 direct reports, it offered an opportunity for people to feel like they were included, provide any feedback, give any decisions that they wanted to make and changes that they may want to make within their department, whatever was reasonable. And I think really the advantage of that when we talk about, how did you, how did that gain a rapport with your staff? How did you feel like they felt, did they feel
Mhm.
supported? Really the feedback I would get was, "Hey, we know when you're being clear and direct and have the information that you can give, and then we also know when you're able to provide some support, even if it means that we want an answer that you couldn't give." Right? So it's both. It's having empathy that maybe there's gonna be letdowns, right? There were a lot of letdowns for me too.
Yeah.
A lot of face down moments where I felt like I either failed them or I was not able to, succeed in the way that I thought I should, whatever, all the narratives. So we can also support one another in that space. And I can also be clear and direct and give guidance, right? So it was a really nice balance that I learned. And again, I wouldn't say the balance was every day because there was a lot of moments where I felt like I was either a little bit more this or a little bit more that, but it existed.
I was always told that clear is kind. Clear
Mm,
communication is kind, right? And that doesn't mean that the receiver of your clear communication is going to always like what you say. Because when you look at those feedback surveys, which if you're not doing that as a leader and you're not getting anonymous feedback, a 360 feedback survey where you're getting from the people who directly report to you and maybe beyond what the perception is, you're really shortchanging your opportunity for growth, I feel like, because if you don't have a good work culture, your staff is just going to be feeding you bullshit about how great you are, and behind your back, they're talking about all the things you're doing wrong. That's not what you want, right? You want that to just come to the front and have somebody, whether they report to you or they're just one of the staff, I wanna be called on it. I want you to tell me if something's not working. I want you to tell me those things, right? But going back to that survey, we talked a little bit about talking to your direct reports, like what would they say about you? And I thought about this, and I think there would be 2 sets of feedback I would get from my reports.
uh-huh.
My first introduction into a real management position in managing people, I was really someone who was coming in trying to make changes, and I was a bull in a china shop, and
Same.
I really tried to gain rapport quickly with some of the staff, but I now learn that my communication was not clear in those moments. I think I leaned a little bit too heavy on the rapport building and wanting to be friendly. So then when the hammer came down around, "Hey, these are the expectations," it wasn't really received well because they thought we were just all chummy and everything was good. Because for years, they were able to behave in a certain way at work with limited expectations or accountability, and now I'm coming in and requiring some accountability, and
Uh-huh.
I have expectations, and they didn't want that. So I think there is a group of people in my early leadership days, and also before some of these skills were kind of finesse, right? You only learn it through making the mistakes.
A lot of mistakes.
I think the feedback there would have been that, like, "She's a bitch." For sure, one of them. For sure,
Oh,
one of the feedback.
definitely. Not
And
even
as
a
a
question. I'm not saying just for you, I'm saying for me too.
I
Relatable.
mean, because as a female leader, I will tell you, if you're assertive, if you're speaking directly at people, especially if you're overseeing a male, you're a bitch. Sorry, but that's how you're going to be perceived.
Yeah.
And I think that I remember this one particular person who was borderline, it was intimidation for sure. I mean, you're talking about somebody who is probably 6'5", a very large man. I would go in the middle of the night on 3rd shift to supervise them,
Oh, I
and
remember this.
it got to the point where I told my leadership, "I don't feel comfortable. He's being threatening to me. All I'm asking him to do is his job. That is in his job description. I don't think that's too much to ask." And I was told, "Well, he's been here for a while and we should just, we really need to just let him do what he's doing. He's been here for a while. You don't want to rock the boat." I was pulled into the office for my tone, which not the first time, for my tone because he reported me. "Well, sir, maybe I wouldn't have a tone if you could sit down and rumble with me and have this conversation." There's two things that I don't mess with. One, it's safety of clients. If there is a safety issue or a risk
Right.
issue with the people that we're
100%.
serving, I
Right.
don't give a shit what you think.
Right.
We are handling this and you're doing there's no compromising.
Right. Right.
That is the
That
one
that
thing.
100%.
And that goes for parenting too, right? I tell my kids all the time, if there's a
Yeah.
safety issue, there's no compromise, there's no
Yeah.
discussion. It is what it is. I'm in charge, you're not.
Yeah.
So and also, you know, do what your job is. I mean, at a bare minimum, I'm not even asking for above and beyond. I'm not asking for some
I
sort
had
of
someone say to me
participation
I
award
had
here.
right, right. I had
Minimum.
someone say to me, "You work an 8-hour shift. You can work every minute of that 8-hour shift. Period." Right? It doesn't matter if your workload increases because we're paying you for an 8-hour shift. We're not paying you based on how much you work during those 8 hours. You're expected to show up from 9 to 5 and work for a total of 8 hours. What you
I mean,
do, the more productive you are in those 8 hours, the better.
just to reframe how absolutely insane, and this goes to my experience as a mid-level manager, right? And so I had the flip side where I
Same.
learned some things not to do, right? So my concerns were invalidated. They were totally minimized. And also, you're telling me that I should just accept unacceptable behavior from the staff. You're talking about 3rd shift staff in a residential facility sleeping, not doing
Sleeping.
their rounds, not doing I mean, 3rd shift, you're talking very simple tasks here. You're talking about stocking toilet paper and paper towels. You're talking about
But
maybe some light cleaning tasks.
just to be clear for the people that are listening, right? Third shift in a residential treatment program, you are the only boots on the ground.
You're
You
it.
are it. You are it. So
Being
if you're
awake is the bare minimum. Bare minimum.
wait, I gotta tell this story. This is so good. This is so good because we talked about this. Me and a couple other directors talked about this. I don't know for how long. Like if I text a few people right now and bring it up, they will know exactly when this occurred. We had a staff member who came in to the facility. Okay. He had been doing okay, right? We wouldn't say he was like over the moon. We wouldn't say he was,
We love those people.
he was kind of
Sometimes just middle of the road. We just
just just
do
middle
have
of
a
the road.
purpose here too.
Just middle of the road. Would you believe that he came back, checked in with me, was like, "Hey, good morning," grabbed a coffee, went up, I think I told you this story. Grabbed a coffee from the company Keurig, made a nice little, entry point for himself, said hello to a couple folks, went up to the front desk, left his keys, did not say anything, and took his coffee with him. The company coffee. No notice, no nothing. Just out.
See ya. It wasn't for him. He had a very strong he was done. See ya.
The fact that he took the coffee, is just so
You know what that example though about the
oh
3rd
no.
shift and like just going back to this feedback that former staff that I've supervised would give is that If you allow people to give you their bare minimum at work every day and you allow them not to have accountability, you avoid having difficult conversations, you're avoiding the conflict, you're saying, "Oh, it's just easier not to address it." Let me tell you that especially in behavioral health, it's a ticking time bomb until there is a critical incident. Especially when you're dealing with people who are suicidal, they're substance using. I mean, we are dealing with high risk situations. I mean, let's not forget that piece of it too, because of course there's the management stuff going on behind the scenes, but at the end of the day, we are dealing with people who are not well. That's why they're in our care, right?
Uh-huh.
So I I just remember thinking that was very early on in my career, and I had already committed to, "I'm gonna stay here, I'm gonna learn what I need to learn, whatever." And in that moment, I learned that sometimes I have to speak up even when it's uncomfortable, and I remember they pulled all the middle managers across the whole agency into a meeting, and in front of the CEO, they were talking about some safety thing,
I
and in front of the
remember.
CEO, I said, I have a question. I just have a question. Since you're here because you don't kn s you know, we don't see you a lot, I just have a question about, when we report us feeling unsafe because of things that the staff are doing, like threatening, posturing over us, making us feel unsafe,
Sleeping on shift
I'm
as
just
well.
curious how we should be addressing those employees when they're not meeting the standards that we have as an agency, and me as we're trying to hold them accountable, and that's their response to this. I would just like your input on that. And that did end up sparking the staff ended up not fired. Not that I want that, but some acknowledgement, some accountability. They got moved from underneath me to another program. Again, just avoiding we're just now passing the buck. We're now passing this problem on to another department, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, so I think the bottom line is there is a group of staff that I've had to really have tough conversations with about their dress, how they show up at the office, maybe smelling, maybe not appropriately dressed, maybe you are doing a walk of shame here. It looks like you had a sleepover and didn't have time to go home to shower. We need to talk about that. You can't be looking like one of the clients. Um, Having conversations about tone and their attitude. I've been on the receiving end of that because frankly, I can just come across way too harsh sometimes, especially when I'm frustrated, especially when it's the 10th time we're having this conversation, my patience is now gone and
Well, I think
and there's an
yeah, I
edge.
mean, I think also but what transpires when we're moving in that direction is how are we lifting them up? How are we creating performance plans that actually holds accountability? I will
Yes.
tell
Are
you
we
that the
documenting it? Are we documenting it?
don't
Because
get
if it's
me
not in your
started.
notes and you
Right.
end up having to fire somebody, you better have those notes done.
Well, let's talk about that. One toxic work habit that I used to think was normal was that you didn't do performance plans. I didn't come from an agency originally that they did them. A lot of things were brushed under the rug. There was not a lot of accountability from leadership. So we were kind of creating our own accountability. And there was a lot of us kind of
So
wavering,
no
right?
consistency.
No consistency.
The
There would
larger
be
you are,
times,
the larger you are, the harder it is to have consistency across departments,
yeah,
agencies, you know?
there was no consistency. So a lot of the things that got changed were, oh, surprise, this bomb just went off and we need to clean it up, right? So again, a lot of things that took place in during that time were reactive to whatever just occurred, right? And what I've shared with folks as I've skinned my knees enough and worked with an HR department that was legitimate was that they started to help managers and staff understand that the reason for a performance plan is to lift the individual up. I wish someone had done that for me,
Well,
right?
again, that goes back to clear is kind. If you are doing a performance plan with somebody and you're doing that annual evaluation, we do a 90, we do if somebody's 90-day isn't so good, we'll throw in a 6 month and then we do an annual.
Uh-huh.
But it's not just about what you're not doing well. It's about what you're doing really well that we are noticing and and
Right.
and we want you to continue. But if you're not sitting down and having that time that is for the staff, they're never gonna know this. They're making their own storyline about how well they're doing in their mind, which is either way too good or way too bad. I mean, that goes in
Right.
both directions, right?
Sure.
But it's
Sure.
not right-sized either
Right.
way.
Right. Right. And yeah, and that was really, I will tell you, that was one of the toxic traits that I carried with me. And then eventually I started having accountability myself, and then I needed to have accountability for my staff, and it just continued to grow and grow and grow. And when I would sit down with directors and be like, "Hey, these are the reasons why a performance plan is necessary." We started doing trainings with managers to help them understand what a PIP was, right? Like, they needed to know. And so through that, I think I started to realize the transparency, the vulnerability, the communication, everything started to improve. And of course, there was a level of, well, I didn't do that or I didn't do that. And you're always going to have those, right? Like the one offs where you're giving us a low score on X, Y, or Z because, you know, because consistently they have kind of fallen short in that department and they want to argue. And I, you know, those things we would, kind of sift through and shake out. But overall, what happened is that then those managers who also never were trained in performance improvement plans, who also never had an HR department. I can't tell you how many behavioral health agencies that I talk to. I'm like, do you have an HR department? They don't.
None.
They don't.
How can you be a people? I mean, it's just me, right? So realistically, I'm HR. However, I have an HR consultant on my team that I defer to and comes in and is part of the team. I don't have a department, right? But we follow HR laws and I also think that's from working in an agency setting. I just had that mindset. But to me in the nonprofit world or where I if you were on a PIP, you were getting fired, okay? Straight up. Like if you were a staff person and you got pulled into the office to be on a PIP, people were telling you to go look for another job because it's their doc. They're just putting you on a paper trail now, right? And again, that goes to a toxic work culture. And I will say what I think is like a toxic thing that I learned to do. One was not being consistent with showing up for my staff. So it's okay and it's normal to have to cancel supervision. I can't tell you how many therapists. Oh yeah, I have a supervisor, but she cancels on me like 3 out of 4 supervisions.
No.
That
Regular
that
supervision. And
so
you know
then
what
you
I
know what
did too?
happens? You know what happens? So then that employee thinks it's okay to cancel on their clients 3 or 4 times a month,
Of course. Yeah.
right? Because, well, it's okay, they'll understand. No.
Well,
The
what
other
was
thing I will say is when I when I would call out, which was very rare. I have migraines. I also had 2 young children at the time. If I had to call out because I was sick, I'll show up. As long as I can work, I'm showing up. But if I call, "Are you sure? Can you just at least, like, take the phone? Are you" it's always this needing more, right? There's never, "Are you okay? What can I do?" "Yeah, definitely take the day." On the flip side of that, me with my staff, I'm like, "You need to take a day. I can see you're at your boiling point. I need you to, like, take a day, refresh, do what you need to do, and take some space," like or when I had somebody call out today, "Let me know if you need anything from me." It's not a shame. It's not like a shaming thing because you had to call out today. Like, well, what's going on with you? Also, I don't need to know all the details, but just know that if you need me, I am here and we can talk it out. And I get that it's a little bit different with 24-hour settings. However, that you can't have
It is a
people
little bit
afraid.
different with 24-hour settings. You can't have people afraid to call out, but there is a line because trust me, there's people that tow it.
But you know what? If you create that culture, people are going to be more apt to call out because they don't give a shit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much sometimes there's no empowerment that's going to get somebody who doesn't want to want to work, right? Like there
Okay,
is a
that's
baseline.
a tangent we don't have time for. I'm
Yeah,
going to be
that's
honest with you.
that's that's a base. And I have a lot of stories. We should do a whole episode dedicated to stories. But to story hour. But what I will say is what I really found to be effective as far as creating a culture where people felt heard was probably about a couple years in to being in leadership. What I really wanted to hear was the frontline workers. And
Okay.
so I would pull 2 people a month for the full year that I would do skip level supervision with and really understand What's going well? What do you like about the organization? What are you struggling with? And it wasn't an opportunity for them to quote unquote like snitch on their supervisor, but it was an opportunity for me to get to know them, what they felt was
I like
uh
that.
what they were really passionate about, just get to know them as people, right? Because I met with every this is another thing that I feel was important was that I would meet with every new hire. And I would say,
I do
I may
that, yeah.
never see you because we're going to work different shifts or whatever it is, but know that you're coming into an organization that cares, that matters, that is going to impact lives, right? And through that, I would watch them develop. So when I would go to skip level supervision with them 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road, whatever it was, if they walked into the office with less zest, less spark, less
Yeah, what's
enthusiasm than
going
when they
on?
walked in, what's going on, right? Is it that is it something that's happening within the work environment? Is it something outside the work environment? And also, like, I was really I've learned a delicate balance of how much I get involved with somebody's outside life. I don't really wanna know everything that's going on in your outside life, but there is a dance where you can create some empathy and hold a little bit of space. But I made very clear across the board, whether that be in skip level or individual supervision with directors, I am not your therapist. I we are not going to do management meetings that resemble any sort of therapy process. I am not going to work with you on any outside issues, but I will support you and, give you some leniency if you need to take care of yourself in some capacity, but you're in charge of that. I think there's a lot of people that walk in and depend on their boss to throw them the life raft and save them from themselves. And again, I think this goes back to that episode. Nobody's coming to save you. You
Yeah,
have to lean in to whatever area that
ask
you
for
need
the
support
help,
in.
you
Right.
know? Yeah. It's a little different for me, and you know this because
Yeah, because you're a group
I
person.
have I have, one of my key staff is someone I grew up with. I have, I have staff. I've had 3 staff total, really 4 that have followed me from previous jobs into this current business, to work for me. One of which has followed me twice, which, is good, but I've developed friendships with them. I've known some of them for 10 plus years, right? So like they know me, they've seen my growth, they've seen my, struggles. They've walked through all these versions too. Um but that goes back to, I want to ask about the brutally honest feedback that you got, but I will say I've
I'm gonna
done
read it. I
360.
have it via text message, so I'm gonna
There you
read it.
go. I got 360 evaluations from my staff.
Nice.
I tried looking it up after you texted me that and I couldn't find. It's probably time to do it again, to be honest with you.
Well,
We
maybe
actually have.
explain to people what a 360 evaluation is, because there's some people that probably don't actually know what that
So a
means.
360 evaluation is basically putting out there is all of these questions asking your direct reports and maybe even the people under them, like in the agency, to get their perspective on you. So, what do you think my strengths are? What are my weaknesses? What am I really good at? Where do all of these things that you're really asking for this feedback. Um you know, we actually have a staff survey that we're putting out to all of our staff just on like an agency level, but even just having this conversation, I'm like, we really need to ask about how they feel supported, maybe some specific questions about myself and the clinical director and how they perceive that, right? But I will say that I was blown away by how positive when I got those 360 evaluations back because I I don't think I'm hard on myself in certain aspects, but I was just expecting a little bit more because I put my foot in my mouth a lot. I am quick to react, and then I've also been a lot quicker to retract before people take action on that. Like I'll be like, "You know what? I stepped in too quick." And I'm really good at like calling myself out to my staff around like,
Mhm.
"You know what? That's my bad. Like I shouldn't have done that," or and I really model that vulnerability with the staff. But I think for me, it really speaks volumes that people trust me and follow me, right, from previous jobs, especially when I'm starting a new venture
Mhm.
and you're taking a chance on me. This is a
Mhm.
risk. This is not a
Mhm.
safe employment,
Mhm.
especially when we were a startup.
Yeah.
Um, And then I think the other thing is I've had actually somebody saw one of my former staff saw my husband recently, and he said to him, "Man, she was the best boss I ever worked for." And I was like,
Awesome.
"Oh, that's so nice."
Awesome.
And I
Yeah.
also had somebody on my birthday this year, who I haven't supervised for 7, 8 years now,
Yeah.
and she said, "Happy birthday. You're one of the most influential people in my life." And it's like, that's the things where it's you don't always know we're planting seeds. Like, some of the people that I supervise, it could be one conversation. It could be a conversation that actually makes them quit my company. It could be
Yeah.
one honest
Totally.
conversations, right? That says, "I really don't think it's a good fit for you here." And we're ripping that Band-Aid off and we're having that honest conversation, but that may be something that changes their life trajectory in a positive way. And it
I
goes back to that being clear is kind.
Mhm.
Clear doesn't mean withholding negative feedback.
Right.
Clear means this is what I'm seeing and this is what I'm presenting to you. And it's up to them to take that and do something with it, you know?
And
Uh,
having to go toe to toe in those conversations, right? There is, and I think there's a little bit to kind of be said about imposter syndrome too, because at times throughout my career, I would struggle to be toe to toe with someone. And I would say, like, hey, this is the feedback I'm getting from other staff. And how can we better cultivate a relationship where your department can play nice with the other department, right? I'm thinking one, you know,
yeah,
example specifically. And I would be sitting there being like, these are medical staff. Listen, like when you work in agency, you're working around directors, nurse practitioners, RNs, LPNs, you know,
you're overseeing doctors. Okay. So talk about imposter syndrome. I remember at first, but now it's like, oh no, I don't care what your degree is. These are the expectations. I need you to be writing your documentation. I need it to be done in a certain way. You
and
might know
leaning
what you're
into
doing
that
as a doctor, but I know what needs to be done with the insurance company. So we're all going to get on the same page and play nice. Okay.
and leaning into that, right. And what happened was, and what I tell, I've had a few directors who have grappled to be able to go in those toe to toe conversations with staff or with the biggest thing that we see going toe to toe with another director, right? Like, how do you rupture with another director, rumble, create conflict, and then how do you repair? And I've really
Oh,
seen some beautiful, beautiful outcomes come out of it where I would say, I am not fighting this fight for you. You need to have the honest conversation.
yeah. You
Because if
need to have
I'm
the tough
pulling
conversations.
I'll sit there with you. I'll have it in my office. I'll watch it go down. I'll support, but I am not going to continue to fight this fight for you. You need to model effective communication. Everything we're doing with an individual in our care is helping them create effective communication styles and heal their behavioral health concerns. And you're telling me you two grown ass adult directors cannot have an honest conversation, then we have problems as an
Get
agency.
it together.
Period. Period.
I
So
will say
all
too, one of the things that came up for me too is I have, after all that feedback that I've had over the years about my communication style, my tone, yes, I'm aware of that now. I'm much more aware of that now than I was, and I'm much more polished with it. But at the end of the day, my staff knows this is what you get,
right. Right.
and I'm gonna be direct. There's some things that I'll be like, "Oh, I'll let it slide." I might make a funny comment about it, but they know, like, "Oh, I better tighten it up." And then there's other times where I'm gonna be like, "No, this needs to get done, and I'm not playing anymore." Like, there's the and again, it goes back down to client care. That is where I draw the line with things.
Safety. Period.
Safety and
Safety.
client care. Like, that's at the end of the day, that's the mission and the vision.
Yeah.
That's where we're at, and that's where the line is drawn. But and everybody has their different personalities. Everyone doesn't have to lead like me to be a
Hmm.
leader. Everyone doesn't need to speak like me. We're very different in some ways and very similar in other ways.
Hmm.
Um, but that's why you put the right people in the right spots to fill in the gaps, right? For where you might not, excel.
And can you period point blank ask somebody for clear, concise feedback, right? So this kind of leads into what would your team tell you if you ask them to be brutally honest about your
What would
leadership
they
style.
say? What would they say,
So I
Molly?
texted them I texted them, and this is at the time, that I was running this specific organization. He was my medical director. I trust him implicitly, and I knew he was going to be direct. So I was like, should I maybe text somebody else for feedback and like make this a little bit more sugar coated before I go live with this? Okay, so this is what he said. Malleable and ductile, can lead from front or from behind, or can stand with the team, can command authority without being authoritarian. That feels good to me.
That's good.
On the flip side, he says, and this is so accurate, can be argumentative, especially when anxious, emotions displayed, but also displaced, can be over inclusive in thoughts and actions, anticipatory worry about the future. And so I think what I drew from that last night was, yeah, I really do struggle. The pros of how I lead are clear. I feel those, I embody those, and the deficits where I struggle, I 100% am impacted, right? Argumentative when anxious, I do that in every area of my life.
1000%.
It's a coping skill. So I said, how do I diffuse the over inclusive in thoughts and actions, right? Even when I am trying to make a point, like you said, when you would go into a discussion with the staff and then you're like, whoa, 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 I got to pull it back, right? I need to allow them to rumble. I need to allow them to have their moment. I need them to,
Mhm.
get to the other side of it, right? And so the takeaway for me when I kind of reached out and asked for that direct feedback and I spoke to a couple other people was the anxiety will always raise up all the other deficits, right? And when I'm calm and when I'm in my zone and I'm grounded, that's when I feel the most authentic version of me, right? But it goes back to last week's episode too, right? Talking about how, if we don't sit and be and we don't allow for healing, whatever that looks like, that's when the anxiety, that's when the overly emotional, those
Oh,
parts
yeah, I'm
become
seeing that.
problematic.
Yeah, I'm seeing that now in some of my staff and how they're kind of leading, and it it's kind of like how I have to sit back and say, "Okay, like, how," again, going back to skinning your knees, I need to wait for a period for somebody to identify this in themselves, but also at some point, you need to step in and have the hard conversation around like, "Hey, this is what I'm seeing," right? So, um I hope that this episode, I really want to hear from people because I feel like so much is coming up for me. And this is why it's important to have these conversations and why
Yeah.
we have been on the phone and why we wanted to start a podcast, right? My hope is
Accountability.
people are going to listen to this and be like, oh, I'm not doing those evaluations. Oh, what, maybe I need to look at our HR process. Like, what do my staff think about me? And part of it is supposed to be thought provoking, but also to give some real world solutions, things that we've had to grapple with, things that we're not always doing perfectly, but it's like little by slow. And I also think it depends on what stage of your business you're in, because I am in a startup phase in one of the businesses and we're still kind of figuring out it's all hands on deck. When you start something, it's all hands on deck.
You
There's
wear
not
all the
clear,
hats.
you're wearing
You
all the
are
hats.
now you are
So,
now an IT director.
which
I
to
don't know
be
what to say
clear,
about it.
I should not be.
Either
I
should I,
am
but I became that.
actually, I just had to text somebody because we have a new staff start today, and she's like, "What's the code to get in?" I'm like, "That seems like an important thing you should have had 45 minutes ago when you started your brand new job today."
Yes.
So, this is just to say,
Yes.
I feel really competent and I feel like I'm crushing it most days. And even with that text, it's like, I would feel shame for something like that. I would, like, beat myself up all day if that happened to me, like, 6 years ago.
100%.
Today, I'm like, "Yo, my bad. I hope
Welcome.
you weren't sitting in the hallway. I hope you knew enough to text somebody else and phone a
I hope you
friend
went and got a
because
coffee. I don't know. I
I hope
mean,
you were just like, you know what, this be," and to be clear, when we interview people, we're like, "This is what you're gonna get here, okay? Functional dysfunction." And not in, like, a bad way, it's just that, like, it's just kind of like we're just talking the solutions out loud at any given point in time, and we're all just trying to figure it out. Because at the end of the day, The clients come first. All this other minutia, door locks, that's listen, if that's the worst thing that
But when
happened
we
to her
talk
today,
about
that's
but
still
when
a
we
good
talk
day.
and when we talk about quality of care, like, our deficits are there, they exist, and we always wanna strive to be better, and again, it goes back to client safety, right?
Oh,
So,
we got our culture of safety questionnaires back from clients and staff, and let me tell you,
10 out of 10, I bet.
agree and strongly agrees across the
Great.
board, all
Yeah,
anonymous,
yeah,
and we are getting some really good feedback from our clients to the point where they don't wanna leave.
yeah.
So,
We
that to
should talk
me
about we need another episode on that, client care and just how to create because I think, what goes hand in hand, and we have to kinda wrap this up, but what goes
work
hand in
culture
hand.
to the client culture.
Yeah, and how the client culture really what is that feedback? Because I will tell you that I got more positive feedback ever and thank yous, right? Behavioral health can sometimes be a thankless job, to be quite honest, right? You treat the client for a certain period of time and then they're
You
on and
don't
upward.
always get feedback.
You don't always get feedback, and I have a different experience, so
Alright,
we'll have to get into
upcoming
that.
episode, let's
Look,
do
we need
that.
a permission slip. Permission slip.
Ooh, I have a permission slip.
I do too. So hopefully it's the same one.
Ooh,
Go.
I'm gonna say your okay, my permission slip is ask for the honest feedback.
I was literally just gonna say it.
Yeah, we did the same one. Ask for the
Ask
honest
for
feedback.
feedback. Yes.
Yeah, because you need to
Lean
start
into a
there.
management meeting, go in there and be like, "Hey, is there anything you guys think I really need to know about myself?" Do it one-on-one if you feel like the group setting is overwhelming, have the individual phone calls, but lean in. It will catapult you with rapport building, effective communication, and
For
listen,
sure.
if you're struggling to communicate with your staff, we're here.
We are here.
Reach out.
Love it.
Would love to hear feedback.
Yes.
Thanks for tuning in today.